Moreover, we know that whatever the Torah says, it says to those living within the framework of the Torah, in order that every mouth may be stopped and the whole world may be shown to deserve God's adverse judgment. For in his sight, no one alive will be considered righteous on the ground of legalistic observance of Torah commands, because what Torah really does is show people how sinful they are. But now, quite apart from Torah, God's way of making people righteous in his sight has been made clear, although the Torah and the prophets give their witness to it as well. And it is a righteousness that comes from God through the faithfulness of Yeshua the Messiah to all who continue trusting. For it makes no difference whether one is a Jew or a Gentile, since all have sinned and come short of earning God's praise. By God's grace, without earning it, all are granted the status of being considered righteous before him, through the act of redeeming us from our enslavement to sin that was accomplished by the Messiah Yeshua. God put Yeshua forward as the kapparah for sin through his faithfulness in respect to his bloody sacrificial death. This vindicated God's righteousness, because in his forbearance he had passed over with neither judgment nor remission the sins people had committed in the past. And it vindicates his righteousness in the present age by showing that he is righteous himself, and is also the one who makes people righteous on the ground of Yeshua's faithfulness. So what room is left for boasting? None at all. What kind of Torah excludes it? One that has to do with legalistic observance of rules? No. Rather, a Torah that has to do with trusting. Therefore, we hold the view that a person comes to be considered righteous by God on the ground of trusting, which has nothing to do with legalistic observance of Torah. So what are we to say? This, that Gentiles, even though they were not striving for righteousness, have obtained righteousness, but it is a righteousness grounded in trusting. However, Israel, even though they kept pursuing a Torah that offers righteousness, did not reach what the Torah offers. Why? Because they did not pursue righteousness as being grounded in trusting, but as if it were grounded in doing legalistic works. They stumbled over the stone that makes people stumble. As the Tanakh puts it, "Look, I am laying in Zion a stone that will make people stumble, a rock that will trip them up, but he who rests his trust on it will not be humiliated." Brothers, my heart's deepest desire and my prayer to God for Israel is for their salvation, for I can testify to their zeal for God, but it is not based on correct understanding. For since they are unaware of God's way of making people righteous, and instead seek to set up their own, they have not submitted themselves to God's way of making people righteous. For the goal at which the Torah aims is the Messiah, who offers righteousness to everyone who trusts. For Moshe writes about the righteousness grounded in the Torah, that the person who does these things will attain life through them. Moreover, the righteousness grounded in trusting says, "Do not say in your heart, who will ascend to heaven?" That is, to bring the Messiah down, or who will descend into Sheol? That is, to bring the Messiah up from the dead. What then does it say? The word is near you, in your mouth and in your heart. That is, the word about trust which we proclaim, namely, that if you acknowledge publicly with your mouth that Yeshua is Lord, and trust in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be delivered. For with the heart one goes on trusting and thus continues toward righteousness, while with the mouth one keeps on making public acknowledgement and thus continues toward deliverance. For the passage quoted says that everyone who rests his trust on him will not be humiliated. That means that there is no difference between Jew and Gentile. Adonai is the same for everyone, rich toward everyone who calls on him, since everyone who calls on the name of Adonai will be delivered. But now can First Corinthians chapter 5. It is actually being reported that there is sexual sin among you, and it is sexual sin of a kind that is condemned even by pagans. A man is living with his stepmother, and you stay proud? Shouldn't you rather have felt some sadness that would have led you to remove from your company the man who has done this thing? For I myself, even though I am absent physically, am with you spiritually, and I have already judged the man who has done this as if I were present. In the name of the Lord Yeshua, when you are assembled with me present spiritually in the power of our Lord Yeshua among us, hand over such a person to the adversary, for his old nature to be destroyed, so that his spirit may be saved in the day of the Lord. Your boasting is not good. Don't you know the saying, it takes only a little hametz to leaven a whole batch of dough? Get rid of the old hametz, so that you can be a new batch of dough, because in reality you are unleavened. For our Pesach lamb, the Messiah, has been sacrificed. So let us celebrate the Seder not with leftover hametz, the hametz of wickedness and evil, but with the matzah of purity and truth. In my earlier letter, I wrote you not to associate with people who engage in sexual immorality. I didn't mean the sexually immoral people outside your community, or the greedy, or the thieves, or the idol worshippers, for then you would have to leave the world altogether. No, what I wrote you was not to associate with anyone who is supposedly a brother, but who also engages in sexual immorality, is greedy, worships idols, is abusive, gets drunk, or steals. With such a person you shouldn't even eat. For what business is it of mine to judge outsiders? Isn't it those who are part of the community that you should be judging? God will judge those who are outside. Just expel the evildoer from among yourselves. So I made up my mind that I would not pay you another painful visit. For if I cause you pain, who is left to make me happy except the people I have pained? Indeed, this is why I wrote as I did, so that when I came, I would not have to be pained by those who ought to be making me happy. For I had enough confidence in all of you to believe that unless I could be happy, none of you could be happy either. I wrote to you with a greatly distressed and anguished heart, and with many tears, not in order to cause you pain, but to get you to realize how very much I love you. Now if someone has been a cause of pain, it is not I whom he has pained, but in some measure, I don't want to overstate it, all of you. For such a person, the punishment already imposed on him by the majority is sufficient. So that now you should do the opposite. Forgive him, encouragement, comfort him. Otherwise, such a person might be swallowed up in overwhelming depression. So I urge you to show that you really do love him. The reason I wrote you was to see if you would pass the test, to see if you would fully obey me. Anyone you forgive, I forgive too. For indeed, whatever I have forgiven, if there has been anything to forgive, has been for your sake in the presence of the Messiah, so that we will not be taken advantage of by the adversary, for we are quite aware of his schemes. For everyone who depends on legalistic observance of Torah commands lives under a curse, since it is written, "Cursed is everyone who does not keep on doing everything written in the scroll of the Torah." Now it is evident that no one comes to be declared righteous by God through legalism, since the person who is righteous will attain life by trusting and being faithful. Furthermore, legalism is not based on trusting and being faithful, but on a misuse of the text that says, "Anyone who does these things will attain life through them." The Messiah redeemed us from the curse pronounced in the Torah by becoming cursed on our behalf. For the Tanakh says, "Everyone who hangs for mistake comes under a curse." Yeshua the Messiah did this so that in union with him the Gentiles might receive the blessing announced to Abraham, so that through trusting and being faithful we might receive what was promised, namely the Spirit. Moreover, the present Kohanim are many in number, because they are prevented by death from continuing in office. But because he lives forever, his position as Kohen does not pass on to someone else, and consequently he is totally able to deliver those who approach God through him, since he is alive forever, and thus forever able to intercede on their behalf. This is the kind of Kohen Gadol that meets our need, holy, without evil, without stain, set apart from sinners and raised higher than the heavens, one who does not have the daily necessity, like the other Kohen Gadolim, of offering up sacrifices first for their own sins, and only then for those of the people, because he offered one sacrifice, once and for all, by offering up himself. For the Torah appoints as Kohanim Gadolim, men who have weakness. But the text which speaks about the swearing of the oath, a text written later than the Torah, appoints a son who has been brought to the goal forever. Hebrews, chapter 8. Here is the whole point of what we have been saying. We do have just such a Kohen Gadol as has been described, and he does sit at the right hand of Ha-Gadullah in heaven. There he serves in the holy place, that is, in the true tent of meeting, the one erected not by human beings, but by Adonai. For every Kohen Gadol is appointed to offer both gifts and sacrifices. So this Kohen Gadol too, has to have something he can offer. Now, if he were on earth, he wouldn't be a Kohen at all, since there are already our Kohanim offering the gifts required by the Torah. But what they are serving is only a copy and shadow of the heavenly original. For when Moshe was about to erect the tent, God warned him, "See to it that you make everything according to the pattern you were shown on the mountain." But now, the work of Yeshua has been given to do is far superior to theirs, just as the covenant he mediates is better. For this covenant had not given ground for fault finding. There would have been no need for a second one. For God does find fault with the people when he says, "See, the days are coming, says Adonai, when I will establish over the house of Israel and over the house of Yehuda a new covenant. It will not be like the covenant which I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by their hand and led them forth out of the land of Egypt, because they, for their part, did not remain faithful to my covenant. So I, for my part, stopped concerning myself with them, says Adonai. For this is the covenant which I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says Adonai. I will put my Torah in their minds and write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. None of them will teach his fellow citizen or his brother, saying, Know Adonai, for all will know me, from the least of them to the greatest, because I will be merciful toward their wickedness and remember their sins no more. By using the term new, he has made the first covenant old, and something being made old, something in the process of aging, is on its way to vanishing altogether. Hebrews chapter 9. Now the first covenant had both regulations for worship and a holy place here on earth. A tent was set up, the outer one, which was called the holy place. In it were the menorah, the table, and the bread of the presence. Behind the second paraket was a tent called the holiest place, which had the golden altar for burning incense and the ark of the covenant, entirely covered with gold. In the ark were the gold jar containing the manna, Aharon's rod that sprouted, and the stone tablets of the covenant, and above it were the cheruvim, representing the Shekinah, casting their shadow on the lid of the ark. But now is not the time to discuss these things in detail. With things so arranged, the Kohanim go into the outer tent all the time to discharge their duties. But only the Kohen Hagadol enters the inner one, and he goes in only once a year, and he must always bring blood, which he offers both for himself and for the sins committed in ignorance by the people. By this arrangement, the Ruach HaKodesh showed that so long as the first tent had standing, the way into the holiest place was still closed. This symbolizes the present age and indicates that the conscience of the person performing the service cannot be brought to the goal by the gifts and sacrifices he offers. For they involve only food and drink and various ceremonial washings, regulations concerning the outward life, imposed until the time for God to reshape the whole structure. But when the Messiah appeared as Kohen Gadol of the good things that are happening already then, through the greater and more perfect tent, which is not man-made, that is, it is not of this created world, he entered the holiest place once and for all. And he entered not by means of the blood of goats and calves, but by means of his own blood, thus setting people free forever. For if sprinkling ceremonially unclean persons with the blood of goats and bulls and the ashes of a heifer restores their outward purity, then how much more the blood of the Messiah, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself to God as a sacrifice without blemish, will purify our conscience from works that lead to death, so that we can serve the living God. It is because of this death that he is the mediator of a new covenant, or will, because a death has occurred which sets people free from the transgressions committed under the first covenant. Those who have been called may receive the promised eternal inheritance. For where there is a will, there must necessarily be produced evidence of its maker's death, since a will goes into effect only upon death. It never has force while its maker is still alive. This is why the first covenant too was inaugurated with blood. After Moshe had proclaimed every command of the Torah to all the people, he took the blood of the calves with some water and used scarlet wool and hyssop to sprinkle both the scroll itself and all the people. And he said, This is the blood of the covenant, which God has ordained for you. Likewise, he sprinkled with the blood both the tent and all the things used in its ceremonies. In fact, according to the Torah, Almost everything is purified with blood. Indeed, without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. Now this is how the copies of the heavenly things had to be purified. But the heavenly things themselves require better sacrifices than these. For the Messiah has entered a holiest place, which is not man-made and merely a copy of the true one, but into heaven itself, in order to appear now on our behalf in the very presence of God. Further, he did not enter heaven to offer himself over and over again, like the Kohen Hagadol who enters the holiest place, year after year with blood that is not his own. For then he would have had to suffer death many times, from the founding of the universe on. But as it is, he has appeared once at the end of the ages, in order to do away with sin through the sacrifice of himself. Just as human beings have to die once, but after this comes judgment, so also the Messiah, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to deliver those who are eagerly waiting for him. End of Hebrews chapter 9. For the Torah has in it a shadow of the good things to come, but not the actual manifestation of the originals. Therefore it can never, by means of the same sacrifices, repeated endlessly year after year, bring to the goal those who approach the holy place to offer them. Otherwise, wouldn't the offering of those sacrifices have ceased? For if the people performing the service have been cleansed once and for all, they would no longer have sins on their consciences. No, it is quite the contrary. In these sacrifices is a reminder of sins year after year, for it is impossible that the blood of bulls and goats should take away sins. This is why, on coming into the world, he says, "It has not been your will to have an animal sacrifice and a meal offering. Rather, you have prepared for me a body. No, you have not been pleased with burnt offerings and sin offerings." Then I said, "Look, in the scroll of the book it is written about me. I have come to do your will." And saying first, "You neither willed nor were pleased with animal sacrifices, meal offerings, burnt offerings, and sin offerings, things which are offered in accordance with the Torah." And then, "Look, I have come to do your will." He takes away the first system in order to set up the second. It is in connection with this will that we have been separated for God and made holy once and for all through the offering of Yeshua the Messiah's body. Now every Kohen stands every day doing his service, offering over and over the same sacrifices which can never take away sins. But this one, after he had offered for all time a single sacrifice for sins, sat down at the right hand of God, from then on to wait until his enemies be made a footstool for his feet. For by a single offering he has brought to the goal for all time those who are being set apart for God and made holy. And the Ruach HaKodesh too bears witness to us, for after saying, "This is the covenant which I will make with them after those days, says Adonai. I will put my Torah on their hearts and write it on their minds." He then adds, "And their sins and their wickedness I will remember no more." Now where there is forgiveness for these, an offering for sins is no longer needed. So, brothers, we have confidence to use the way into the holiest place, opened by the blood of Yeshua. He inaugurated it for us as a new and living way through the Paroket, by means of his flesh. We also have a great Kohen over God's household. Therefore, let us approach the holiest place with a sincere heart, in the full assurance that comes with trusting, with our hearts sprinkled clean from a bad conscience, and our bodies washed with pure water. Let us continue holding fast to the hope we acknowledge, without wavering, for the one who made the promise is trustworthy. And let us keep paying attention to one another, in order to spur each other on to love and good deeds, not neglecting our own congregational meetings, as some have made a practice of doing, but rather encouraging each other,